Hi, it's Jo, and this is a pretty different video to the usual ones. I'm using this platform to pretty much download and tell you what I'm thinking at the moment, and I'm troubled by a few things. Around this coronavirus, where in Queensland, where I live, we have 0 cases. In fact, I heard we've pretty much eradicated the virus here. Now that may or may not change, but at the moment we are safe. As a clinical psychologist, I've got people that are afraid to come into my office. I had someone a couple of weeks ago standing at the door with 2 masks on actually, afraid to come in and hesitant to even get near me. And I reassured them that everything was fine here. There's a lot of older people who are terrified to go out to come and see me. They're requesting telephone consultations. I've got a couple of friends in other countries, one lady in particular who hasn't been out of the house for 3 months in fear. I've got to address this because it's getting out of control. Yeah, we should be cautious, but we shouldn't be crazy. Now, I have seen in my own practice 2 different clients who came to me for their own reasons, but both told me about 2 individual cases where someone they knew had committed suicide. And this is the unspoken problem that we are, or the media, is somehow sweeping under the carpet. The mental health crisis, the economic crisis, the impact in families, the increase in domestic violence, the problems that this COVID restrictions and the lockdowns are causing in our homes, in our very homes, in our communities, in our countries, and globally. That's the problem. It's not so much the illness itself. There are people taking their own lives, and I'm seeing this. Did you know that since March, we have had in Australia, I don't know what it is, what are we today, the 8th of August? Go check what the figures are today, but I don't think it's more than 250 deaths. It's around that since March. But do you know how many suicides we've seen here? Over 1,200. Okay, think about that for a second. 1,200 suicides versus 250, let's say, COVID deaths. Now, we already know that the majority of those deaths are people that are old. Now, that doesn't mean it's okay. I don't want to see my mum, who is vulnerable, who is immunocompromised, get COVID and die alone in a hospital with a ventilator. Of course not. I don't want to see any people die. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. COVID isn't the big issue here. It's the economic damage. It's the destruction of our economy, of finances, of relationships, the increase in domestic violence. The problems with suicide now are becoming so big that it astounds me why we're not addressing this, why we're not looking at the impact of what these restrictions are doing on everyday Australians, even in a place like Queensland where we're pretty much 0 cases. I can't imagine what it's like, even in Victoria, where they're under these harsh stage 4 lockdowns. I mean, this has become a social disease. We can't let that happen. We talk about social distancing. Well, what about physical distancing? Let's just call it physical distancing for a moment, because we need to be social creatures. We're humans. We can't touch people. We can't touch the hand or hold the hand of people that are dying alone in hospitals. Now, I know that the doctors and the nurses are saying that they're doing their best to never let anyone die alone. But what sort of consolation is that for families whose mother, whose father, their brother, their sister, and sometimes child is in a hospital bed without them by their side because of this coronavirus? We've got to start questioning this. Now, I'm not being a vigilante. I'm not telling people to go out and protest and risk the lives of others. So don't shoot the messenger, but we've got to call this what it is. This is a social disease, and we are slowly killing ourselves even more with this through all the collateral damage that it's causing in our homes. We are letting people die alone, and that's inexcusable. Now, I at one point did a whole thing on touch. When I was at uni, I did a whole paper on touch. Humans are wired to be touched from birth until the day we die. Our need for physical contact remains. Being touch-starved or being deprived of touch, well, this occurs when a person is experiencing little to no touch from other humans or other living beings. And boy, are we seeing that at the moment. We are being threatened with fines and penalties and indeed incarceration if we breach these rules. But touch is essential to life. You know, there were stories in the Romanian orphanages that I remember reading about where a cleaner would leave at the end of the day and she would pick up the last little baby on her way out, because these orphanages, there were beds upon beds upon beds, row after row of little babies that were left in their cots for days, for weeks, for months, through these critical periods of development. Some of them never learned to talk or walk or even just the human things that we think everyone has a right to. But you know what? The little babies that were in the corner where the cleaner stopped to hug them, to hold them on the way out, something was different about them. They thrived. And for a long time, the staff were unsure what was going on. Why was it these positions of the cots at the end of the room near the door were the ones that had the babies that did better than the others? And they learned it was because those were the ones that would touch the most, if even only for a few minutes each day. Touch is critical to life. We can't live without it. Skin-to-skin contact is vital for mental and emotional health and physical health too. You know, when you feel snowed under or pressured, the body releases the stress hormone, this chemical called cortisol. And one of the biggest things touch can do is it can reduce these chemicals, and it can reduce the stress, and it can allow the immune system to function in the way that it was meant to. It can buffer us against stress and things like hopelessness that we are seeing in these people that are choosing to take their own lives. You know, my mum at the moment, she has dementia. She has advanced stage dementia, and she is at a point where she can't mobilize. She's in a bed. She can't toilet. She can't talk. She can't communicate anything. She can't eat on her own. All she has is touch. Now, I did move away from Sydney up here to Queensland a couple of years ago, and there were reasons for that, which I won't go into in this video, but it was about my own survival and the survival of my son, who both our lives had been consumed by caring for her and the world of dementia in a very challenging way. Frontotemporal dementia causes problems with behaviour and disinhibition, and the things we had to endure with my mum as her disease progressed was something I wouldn't wish upon anyone. And eventually we had to make that decision to put her into a home, and we did. And then 2 years ago, I thought that it's time for me to try and have some life for myself and my child, who was suffering from severe anxiety and a death anxiety, afraid that everyone around him was going to die. So we moved up here to Queensland, and it was the best decision I've ever made. A difficult one, but certainly one I don't regret. But I had committed when I moved to going back to see mum every couple of months. And until the COVID situation came upon us, I was. Every few months, I'd go down and see her. And as soon as I got back to Queensland, I'd book the next trip, always knowing when it was coming up, always looking forward to seeing her, never truly knowing if the next time I saw her was the last time I saw her. So I look forward to it. And now those trips have been cancelled. And I don't know if my mum will be one of these people that dies alone without even the dignity of having her family by her side. The warm sense of someone loving you and holding you as you take your last breath. And that scares me today. I can't even begin to imagine that. The one thing I've always said when I moved away is I need to be there when that last day comes. It was always my fear that I wouldn't get back in time. And the nursing home knows, please call me as soon as there's decline so I can be there. And now even that may have been taken away from us because of this COVID situation, which is out of control. It really is. Connection is critical. We humans need this connection. We cannot just sit back and allow all our liberties and all our freedoms and our human rights and our life-sustaining mechanisms such as touch and breath and life to be taken from us, because that's what we're doing. Now, again, I'm not asking you to cause a scene. I'm not asking you to protest. I'm not asking you to be a vigilante, but I'm asking you to think about it. think about what is happening. Think about the fear that you're living in. Think about the damage that's happening, not as a result of COVID, but as a consequence of the decisions we're making to manage COVID. And I have to ask myself, is it worth it? And I cannot for the life of me think that it is. I can't sit by watching all this catastrophic collateral damage happening in families and in communities and think that this is okay, that this is worth it. The data isn't there to support this. It really isn't. You know, we should quarantine the sick. We should quarantine the sick, but we should not incarcerate the well. And that is what we're doing. And that is disgraceful. That is, you know, there's no consideration to our human freedoms in that. We should be with people that we love when they take their last breath, and there should be no laws that regulate that or prohibit that. We need to stop living in fear. You know, up here, 0 cases, and yet people are still having to, you know, do all sorts of things before they walk into a shop. Masks are being worn up here, not necessary. And that's the other thing, the misinformation. You know, one day you're told that masks are not doing anything. The next day you're told that they're mandatory. I mean, we are confused, we are living in fear, and we are seeing the dire consequences of that manifest in mental illness, domestic violence, and suicides. And as a clinical psychologist, it's really hard to sit back and think that that's okay and endorse that and support that. I have other opinions about other motives of why this is happening, which I'm not going into in this video because I don't want to turn this into, you know, some sort of conspiratorial narrative. But we've got to start asking why. You know, stop believing everything you hear. Don't believe things just because a person of authority says it. Even if it's an argument that supports your point of view, look at the arguments to the contrary. Be an informed human being. Use your cerebral cortex. Look at the pros, the cons, compare and contrast, and ask questions. Do not be a passive recipient and just absorb everything that you hear as accurate and truthful, because I can assure you there's very little truth in what we're seeing at the moment. And truth and fear are incompatible. You know, if there was any truth in what we're hearing at the moment, the fear wouldn't be there, because the numbers, 250 deaths so far to COVID, 1,200 deaths to suicide in the same period of time. We should be fearing suicide. We should be fearing that. That should be where our concern is, and we should be cautious around the other. The media has a lot to answer for. The censorship that is happening around the globe now is frightening. It really is. Everything is getting censored. Those doctors that spoke out recently about hydroxychloroquine, they were absolutely censored. Every time they uploaded a video, it was taken down by YouTube. Why? Why are we censoring a medical professional's opinion on something, on a medication that they believe is the right medication for their patients? Why is that being censored? I mean, ask yourself why. And unite us. What is happening at the moment is dividing us. The chasm between us is growing, between those that think this is a real thing and those that think it's not, those that want to wear masks and those that refuse. What it's doing is causing a big divide, and yet we're hearing that we're in this together. What's happening at the moment is divisive. It's tearing us apart. All I'm suggesting in this video is that we need to be connected, and we have to look at the true damage that's being done from some of the decisions that are being made. We have to stop living in fear, and most of all, and this was the purpose of this video, we can't leave our loved ones to die alone in fear, in terror, taking their last breaths to whatever it is they're taking their last breaths to. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the context of COVID, but these restrictions, we have to consider that. And are we going to accept that? Are we going to say that's okay? I'm not. And I'll reach out to you to be an informed person and make your own informed decision. That's all for today, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.